Hi everyone, happy holidays. So it is Thanksgiving and I promised some more cooking videos. How useful they are to you, I'm not sure. Anyway, we are going to do a nice mushroom Wellington. So you want one medium to medium large onion, cut and dice, mind your fingers. I'd forgotten since I switched back to organics how much the onions can make your eyes water. I think you can run them under ice water, or there's a specific chef's technique you can use to cut them that avoids that. But yeah, we're not going to worry too much about that. So we're just going to dice these into like quarter-inch pieces roughly. Going to put together a little herb blend here: basil, thyme, a little garlic, and some sage. There it is, all blended together. I'm not really following the recipe here. My pan is preheated, no oil. Non-stick Calphalon is what I use. I've had really good luck with it. Okay, washed mushrooms. These are just baby bellas. You can use any kind, whatever you prefer. I do like to take the base off of the stems even after washing them. These I'll cut a little bit larger than the onion pieces, but I anticipate them actually ending up approximately the same size as the onion pieces, approximately a quarter-inch. They hold a lot more water than the onions, so they'll shrink down to about the same size. So you'll notice I really haven't done anything with the onions. You just got to get them in there and leave them. That's one of the secrets of oil-free cooking. You got to be patient. You got to preheat your pan, and you don't want to mess with it. So those onions are caramelizing and heating through nicely. You can't really see, but there's some really nice little brown crispy pieces in there. We'll give them a stir. As you can see, there's really not much sticking. There's one little patch there, but I'm not worried about it. So I'll just add the mushrooms in. What I've also done, I prepped more onion, about another half an onion, and about another half a cup of mushrooms. Just going to add in the spice blend, herb blend here. Stick the lid back on. Oop, black pepper, almost forgot. Fresh ground. And a teeny tiny bit of salt. That's just the coarse kosher. Salt is salt is salt. Doesn't matter what kind you use. Not good for you, especially if you have hypertensive problems. So this is the extra half onion and the extra half cup of mushrooms that I cut up. This is what we're going to use for our gravy. Just going to dump them in the saucepan. Let that heat through. Bring my heat down, just give it a stir to mix her up. I'll try and get some of the moisture off the lid back in there. Sometimes you get more than others, depending on, I think, how old the mushrooms are. Wasn't really enough in this one, so I'm going to add some low sodium vegetable stock. It's the brand I use. I often make my own, but I didn't have any on hand this time. I'll just use whatever kind of vegetable tops and tails I've got left over and just cook them down, puree them and freeze that and use that for stock. But this Imagine brand seems to be pretty good, and it's relatively low in sodium. So most of that moisture's already been sucked up by the mushrooms again. I may need to give it another splash. Need a little moisture in there just so the flavour of the herb blend we put in there is going to release. That part is almost done. Take a little taste over to the boss, make sure she's happy. She is. So I'm just going to let that cool down on its own. Now back to our gravy blend. Really just got some warmth into these pieces. I'm going to add just a couple of tablespoons of water just to get the pieces off the bottom there. So we're going to have about a tablespoon, maybe two, of low sodium tamari. Give or take. Still relatively high in sodium, so you do need to be careful. You can delete the salt and you can use coconut aminos, some sage, some coconut aminos if you have bad hypertension. I do have hypertension myself, but it's well controlled on a vegan diet, whole food plant-based diet, lots of green leafy vegetables. Helps me with my nitric oxide production. Helps the motility of my vessels, some thyme. So this is essentially the same herb blenders I used in the what we're going to be using as the filling for the Wellingtons. This one I am actually going to measure for once. And this is half a cup of low sodium veggie broth. Like I say, it's real easy to make. It's just didn't have any on hand. And as it's the holidays, we're going to go crazy. So I normally use the low-fat coconut milk. The premium does have a lot more saturated fat in it. But it is the holidays, so we're not going to worry too much about that. Let's get the dregs out of that with a little extra water. Bring that heat up. Get that blended together nicely. Check my recipe again. Nutritional yeast. This is Dr. Furman's blend. It is contains folate, not folic acid, which is artificially produced. We also use Red's Mill nutritional yeast, but that does use folic acid. Something to be aware of, not a huge concern. We use the nutritional yeast a lot in some of our Italian dishes just to try and help give stuff a little bit of a cheesy flavor. In this recipe, it just kind of helps add to the layers of flavor in there. And I'm basically, the herb blend I'm using, you could use whatever you wanted, Italian herbs or herbs de Provence, any of those blends. This is just basically what I got laying around. So we're going to thicken it a little bit. Tablespoon of cornstarch. You can use arrowroot or whichever thickener you like to use. So if you really wanted to, you could just reduce it down. But I don't really want to lose too much volume on this. You can see that's starting to get some nice heat in it. So I'll just blend that, make sure it's nice and smooth. If you're a novice cook, don't put cornstarch directly into the dish. You want to blend it into a smooth little thick liquid like this, then add it. Otherwise you'll end up with just nasty lumps in your gravy. Can't really tell that's thick, and once that heats through a little more, it will thicken up nicely. And I really just go by whatever I'm cooking, how thick I want it to be. So I'm pulling out the mushrooms and the onions. You can certainly make the gravy really chunky if you want to. I prefer it just a little bit smoother, so I'm just going to put it in my little, it's just a little Ninja chopper that I have. It's just a two-blade chopper. Saves me having to use the big old food presser, so you see in the background there to the right of my computer. And I'm just going to blitz this very quickly, just 2 or 3 1-second bursts, and that's just going to reduce the size of everything down. I love this little chopper. The motor's in the lid, and it comes with 4 of these containers. I use it a lot for like my Indian dipping sauces, because I can make them in each one and then serve them out of each one, or just take them to parties or whatever. It's also really good for making my peanut sauce that I make for my Thai fresh rolls. Get all the good stuff out of there. I really like these smaller silicone cooking utensils. Those soft edges really help get into the nooks and crannies of the containers, so you get all your stuff out. Really useful for the cashew cream out of the Vitamix as well. As you can see, that's much thicker than it was, but not too thick. Tastes good to me. It's just me and Kim eating, no guests, so I'm double dipping the spoon. I wouldn't normally do that if we had company coming. Got approval from the boss. It just needs a little more something something. I was going to put a little paprika and cayenne in there, but I just decided to go with a little extra tamari. I'm not sure if you get the benefits of the soy product in the tamari for reducing the effects of the sodium that's in it. I know you do from miso, even though miso is high in sodium. Alright, going to let that set. All that stuff is cooked. So I'm going to put together the vegan egg wash for the top of my pastry. So you want to take the aquafaba out of the garbanzo beans. It's just garbanzo bean water from the cans. About a teaspoon and a half of oil. That's just to give it a little bit of a glaze. Again, the tamari. It's really just for color. And then we're going to add in a little maple syrup. And that's really, it's just going to caramelize on top. So we're just going to get a nice, nice kind of color finish and crispiness to the top of our pastry. I like to use, I am not a baker, I'm not much of a cook either, as you can see from the video, but I'm definitely not a baker. Kim prefers to bake. But so I use the phyllo pastry that you can get in the freezer section of your grocery store. Just look for one with no animal products in. And of course I put everything in too small of a container, so I cannot really whisk it up. So if you watch closely, you'll see you almost get that frothy kind of head on top of this mixture, similar to you would with egg whites if you were just using eggs primarily to do the wash. And this one actually came out really nicely. The pastry I use comes in two rolls. I'd actually forgotten to defrost this, so I actually ended up doing it in the microwave, which you really don't want to do. The moist part in the center of the pastry, when you heat it like that in the microwave, will have a horrible tendency to stick and tear. The phyllo is pretty hard to work with at the best of times, and you're going to see here a few times where it's going to kind of fall apart and tear. That one came apart reasonably well, but out of one roll, yeah, you see it tear there. Out of one roll, I can make basically 2 Wellingtons and 2 apple turnovers. What I do when this stuff starts to disintegrate is I'll just kind of layer it up, almost like I'm making a plywood laminate. You know, I'll just, wherever the tear or the hole is, I'll just put a solid piece above that and just kind of keep putting those together. And that way you can get away with it. Once this stuff's up to room temperature, you do want to be careful with it, but it's not too bad to work with. And I don't know how many layers there are in one roll, but I'm thinking I probably use 6 to 10 layers for each piece. Like I say, I can get 4 out of one roll. So on the inside, we're going to go with some Dijon mustard. I think the recipe calls for it to be blended together and kind of painted in, almost like you're icing a cake. But this gives it a really nice tang to the overall flavour. And you can use coarse grind. I'm sure you could even use yellow mustard if that's all you had handy. Won't be quite the same flavour, but the Dijon really gives it a nice thing. Okay, baby spinach. So we're going to make a nice little layer of baby spinach on top of the mustard. I was always a little cautious about, not that this is going to be raw spinach, but I was always a little cautious about raw spinach because of the oxalates in it. I do get horrible gout, which also gives me a tendency to be more susceptible to kidney stones. Touch wood, I've never had one, but if you've had a kidney stone, you definitely want to avoid too much in the way of oxalates. But I just read an article recently where they're saying that the oxalates from vegetables doesn't seem to play a major role in forming kidney stones. I'd have to read up more on that to see if that's completely accurate. But not as much of an issue when you're eating cooked spinach. And Kim made a palak paneer the other night. That was absolutely excellent. That was out of Dr. Colin Campbell's daughter's cookbook. Um, and it was really, really good. I really enjoyed it. So I'm doing good on my spinach this week. So I'll put that top fold over. Um, ideally, you want it to be, you want your filling to take up the middle third, and then you want a third to wrap over the top, and then a third to go back over the other piece of the top. So I'll just put the wash on there, and that'll help hold the pastry in place while I'm putting everything together. You don't want to go too crazy with it, or this phyllo pastry will just disintegrate. But if it's just too dry, it'll just flake, and you can't really form a good case in. Now, once I've got them formed, I'll be quite generous with this, especially on the ends and the seams. And I've got these on some silicone baking mats. I think these are supposed to be oven proof up to 450 degrees. We've used them a few times so far. They've been really good. I much prefer to use these than just oiled tin foil. There's no waste, they're reusable, and no contamination from the foil. And same again. Top one over, plenty of the wash on it. Fold the bottom one up to form a nice little pocket. Close and moisten my ends. And then I'll just slide these straight onto cookie trays, bacon trays, whatever you got. And I'll pop them in the oven. I've got the oven up to temperature set at 390. I've got it on convection bake, so I probably don't need full time. I think the recipe called for 30-35 minutes. I put them in for 35, and they came out just perfect. But we are at 8,000 feet in altitude, so you do have to adjust your cooking times a little bit. I'd do it a few times and just see what works for you.